You ready? All right. I'm not ready. Okay. I'd like to call the March 21st, 2022 meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors to order. If everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone joining us in person this evening and those who are viewing remotely. And I just want to share President Amber Concepcion's regrets that she's unable to attend today. She's dealing with district matters at the State College Borough Council meeting this evening. So you've got me, the B team. Board members, with an agenda before you, are there any changes? Let me double check, because I know Laurel is online. Laurel, did you have a change?
Yes, please. Would you please pull the minutes of the CCL committee out of the consent agenda?
Okay, so that is item 5B. So item 5B will become action item 6A. And now we'll have Dr. O'Donnell review some housekeeping items for the meeting.
Thank you.
I'm sorry?
Roll call.
Did I miss it?
That's after my,
It's after Bob.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I didn't forget.
Thank you, Dr. Bader. For our audience this evening, 30 minutes will be provided at the beginning of the meeting for public comment for items related to board business that are not on the action item portion of the agenda. If additional time is necessary, the board may consider reopening public comment after the board business is completed or during the next meeting. Each individual will be limited to comments of up to 3 minutes as time permits for items related to board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. For action items, public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item as required by school code. This approach also allows for comments to be informed by the presentation and board's discussion of the respective item. Since this is a public meeting, we will not permit remarks regarding individual students. If you'd like to share something with our board about individual students, please email them. During the meeting, the IT help desk is available if those viewing remotely encounter technical difficulties. You may email itsupport@scasi.org or give them a call at 814-231-7743. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. O'Donnell. This is not my first rodeo, and I have some lovely notes from our board secretary. So now we'll move on to roll call for board directors.
Dr. Anderson. Here. Dr. Bader.
Here.
Ms. Brandt.
Here.
Dr. Buck.
Here.
Dr. Crevenfor.
Here.
Dr. Duffy.
Here.
Ms. Huff.
Here.
Ms. Zidney.
Thanks. So this evening we have one retirement recognition. Margaret McCaffrey is retiring June 3rd after 28 years with the district. Maggie to her colleagues, she was hired in 1994 as a paraprofessional at Housekeeping Elementary. Spring Creek principal Todd DeShong picked up the story saying, back in 1994, the song Circle of Life from The Lion King came out, and Maggie joined the SCASD Circle of Life as an over-enrollment para. The ensuing year, she was a personal care para, and the next 4 years, she was a health para. The real magic began when she became the building secretary at Housekeeping in 2000, and then at our combined Lamont Housekeeping, which became known as Spring Creek Elementary. I had the opportunity and pleasure to work with Maggie over the past 10 years from 2012 to 2022. First, let me say this. While computers are a wonderful thing, if each school had a Maggie, computers would be obsolete. She is a meticulous and detail-oriented person who was a walking calendar, knew ASAP and accounting in and out, was the keeper of files and documents over the years that I needed and couldn't find, always reminded me of fire and weather drills, and served as a superb greeter, organizer, fielder of questions, and phone and door manager. She was also a master of the English language who I relied upon to edit correspondence and newsletters with great accuracy. Maggie was well connected in the community. She knew families and all the faculty and staff, and was the person I could pull aside and trust in being a sounding board. While sometimes things got tense, we learned to take some deep breaths and remember what needed immediate attention and what didn't, to keep calm and exhibit Hawk Nation spirit. With certainty, Maggie was particularly fond of when I would play music over the school sound system in the morning to greet the students. She would get up out of that chair and groove around the office. She really should have been in Saturday Night Fever. She does have some great dance moves. One thing is for sure, Maggie is one classy lady. She always knew how to class things up around the office, and for gatherings and meetings, she had a special touch to make things feel special, welcoming, and professional. Despite the overuse of the cliche, big shoes to fill, this can't be overstated in regards to Maggie. She has been a true foundational employee at Spring Creek Elementary that has supported its smooth operation through her tenure. And now, 28 years later, her SCASD circle of life is completed. She will be missed greatly. However, since she only lives about a block from Spring Creek, we do expect her to bring in weekly treats for everyone. Best in your retirement and on your next Circle of Life chapter, Maggie. The board thanks Maggie for her service and also wishes her the best in retirement. Next up, item 3, we have communications. So we have an update from Dr. O'Donnell and the superintendent.
Thank you. On Thursday, we had a work session with the board regarding the health and safety plan, so I don't have anything further other than things seem to go pretty well today. I haven't heard from every school, but I was over at the high school to start the day, and it seemed to be going smoothly. So I do have some recognitions regarding several students for their recent accomplishments, some of which we'll be inviting to upcoming board meetings in line with our practices. Our Mountain 80 Middle School Math Counts team, this is pretty near and dear to my heart as a former math teacher. So, the Mountain 80 Middle School Math Counts team recently cleaned up at the state competition for the 2022 Math Count season. Aaron Lee repeated as state champion, followed by teammates Kevin Liu in second, Will Liu in third, and Aiden Lee in fourth. All four will represent Pennsylvania at the national competition, coached by their advisor and Mountain 80 Middle School math teacher, Rebecca Schoberg. The first time the entire Pennsylvania team has come from our school district. Pretty cool. More details will be shared soon on the district website, so congratulations to everyone for a great showing. More state champions, now to athletics. Congratulations to State High sophomore Pearson Manville for winning a state wrestling title in the 138-pound weight class on March 12th. Pearson is the first State High wrestling champion in 19 years. Other State High medalists, Nick Pavlechko at 215 pounds came in third place, and he had a real close semifinal bout. And Asher Cunningham at 120 pounds finished in 8th place. So congratulations to those 3 guys on the team. Congratulations to the State High girls and boys 4x800 meter relay teams for winning state titles at the indoor state meet on February 27th. The girls team consisted of Grace Morningstar, Chloe Poindexter, Natalie Konkowski, and Marley Kwasnika. The boys team consisted of Matt Stanier, Trent Dennett, Tony Zolov, and Sean Adams. Other notable performances included as follows: Shannon Mullen, 3rd place in the long jump and 4th place in the triple jump. Girls distance medley relay finished in 3rd place. That team had Amy Devon, Grace Morningstar, Natalie Konkowski, and Marley Kwasnika. Brian Lindenberg, 8th place in the 400 meter, and Sean Adams, 5th place in the 800 meter. The boys 4x400 team finished in 6th place. Ryan Lindenberg, Matt Stanier, Salahundin Abdul Hamid, and Sean Adams. So congratulations to both the boys and girls teams. Pretty impressive. That was a long list. Swimming state silver medal. I'd like to congratulate State High's Jade Castro for winning a silver medal in 100-yard backstroke at the state swimming championships last Thursday. She also finished 4th in the 200-yard individual medley. In addition, Jade teamed with Mackenzie Paget, Ali Cole, Madison Watchke for a 4th place finish in the 200-yard medley. So congratulations to the team. State High Master Singers. The high school's Master Singers Ensemble and its director, Eric Clayton, have been selected to perform at the state conference for the Pennsylvania Music Educators on April 8th. Only 3 high school ensembles in the state were chosen for further performances. A special concert to celebrate the honor will take place Tuesday, April 5th at 7:30 p.m. in the high school's Performing Arts Center. So congratulations to Mr. Clayton and our singers. And finally, upcoming thespian show. The State College Area High School Thespians invite you to their 2022 spring production of Seussical. They're thrilled to be able to hold in-person performances once again, and they look forward to welcoming you back to State High's beautiful auditorium for a magical night of music and theater. Shows will be on March 31st, April 1st, April 2nd. Those are at 7:30 p.m. and on April 3rd at 2 p.m. And tickets are available via the Thespians website. So, there are a lot. That's all I have.
Great.
Any
Thanks.
questions? Thanks.
Congratulations to all those students. That's really
And-
impressive.
And we'll have, we typically have a practice of state champions coming in to be honored and recognized with the board.
That'd be great. Next up, we have a legislative update. Jackie and Carleen, do you have anything you would like to share?
No, that's good.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I'll do my best to be concise, but there's been a lot going on. From the federal government, Congress passed a spending bill that will fund all federal agencies through September 30th. And of note, they increased funding to a lot of educational causes in this bill. However, they failed to extend the U.S. Department of Agriculture waiver authority for the school meal program. The current authority for the USDA to issue waivers will expire on June 30th. These waivers were responsible for all the creative and meaningful ways we were able to feed kids in the past 2 years. Without the waivers, school food programs will have much less flexibility to deliver food to students over the summer. They will not be permitted to package and distribute food on a weekly basis, but instead will have to revert to a requirement that meals must be served in a group setting. In addition, these waivers also provided about 90 cents extra for each meal served than when schools were under the regular lunch program. This extra funding, along with increased flexibility, allowed 90% of schools across the country to provide free meals to all students during the school year, including here in Scasty. So there's a lot of movement right now. Because this didn't get extended, there are a lot of advocates pushing to see it changed, and so we'll watch it and see what happens. President Biden's fiscal year 2023 budget is expected Thursday, so look for that. And also, while the Senate passed a bill proposing permanent daylight savings time beginning in 2023, this idea has run into a lot of resistance in the House, so it is far from being a done deal, so we don't need to worry about it quite yet.
Excellent. That's what I want to hear.
As for Pennsylvania, I'll save the good news for last. So the House Education Committee conducted a hearing on teacher shortages, and the state officials revealed that there's been a 66% decrease in new teacher certifications over the past 11 years. It's a little concerning. Everyone is on board with trying to figure things out to help with that. There were some changes to Chapter 49 regulations for certification of professional personnel that have been approved by the IRRC and will become effective upon publication. I have details if anyone wants to see them. Closing arguments were heard in the educational funding lawsuit. They only lasted 7 hours. So what happens now, there's additional procedural steps that both parties of the suit will be doing into the summer, at which point there should be a decision. However, an appeal to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is likely. Just to give you an idea of what outcomes could come out of this, so the judge could rule that Pennsylvania school funding violates its Constitution's educational clause, which requires that the state provide a thorough and efficient system of education to serve the needs of the Commonwealth, and or that Pennsylvania school funding violates the Equal Protection Clause by discriminating against an identifiable class of students who reside in school districts with low incomes and property values. So we will wait and see what happens there, but the good news is the legislature doesn't have to wait to increase funding. So they will be considering Governor Wolf's proposed $1.3 billion increase to state education in the upcoming budget cycle. So the breaking news of the day is that although last week both state and House education committees were urging for the rejection of Governor Wolf's administration charter school regulations, today the IRRC met and passed the regulations 3-2. So there, some highlights are that this will allow school districts to hold charter schools to high academic, fiscal, and administrative standards and ensure that charter schools will equitably serve all students. It clarifies that charter school trustees are subject to the state's Public Official and Employee Ethics Act, which is the same act we are subject to as school board members. And it will require charter schools to use common accounting principles and auditing standards, just as we do. That'll make it a little easier to review finances. This is the first step of enacting Governor Wolf's proposed charter reforms. Up next will be consideration of the legislative package to provide consistency, transparency, and accountability while preserving school choice, his quote. So keep an eye out for SB 27 and HB 272 for that effort. So just to be clear, with the IRC approval of these regulations, it's possible that the House Education Committee or Senate Education Committee will propose a concurrent resolution. And if that happens, when that happens, the full House and Senate have 30 days to pass the concurrent resolution and send it to the governor. But all indications would be that it would probably be vetoed, unless they can get over the veto vote. So these regulations are kind of good to go at this point. So it's a big win. That's
great to
all
hear.
I have.
Awesome, thanks, Jen. Did you have anything else to add, Carleen? No? Okay. I just want to make sure. Next up, we have Center Region Council of Governments Liaison Report. Gretchen or Peter?
Yep.
Okay.
So I have 5 things. Okay, first is that the contracts were approved by the Parks Authority for the Whitehall Road Regional Park, which is really exciting because that's been years in the making. And it was a big celebratory moment at that meeting when that finally happened. So that's a very happy thing. Number 2 is that the Center Parks and Rec has expressed a desire to enter into an MOU with the school district. This was a recommendation coming from the master plan study from a couple years ago. And it was worked on last spring and sort of looked at, and then not much was done. And so now the Parks Authority is asking once again if the school district could take a look at the draft, see what people think. And so I had suggested that possibly a point to start just a conversation, is what we're talking about, would be in facilities and grounds. So that's probably going to happen at some point. There's not really a huge rush, but that's out there. And so I wasn't sure if everybody knew about that, so just wanted to let everybody know.
I think that'll be good, especially coming out of the pandemic with, hearing all the bumps in usage of buildings and all the scheduling. And so I think that'll be good. We're excited to have people using our facilities full steam ahead, and so the time will be good. Thanks.
Yeah, and it's really a good neighbor kind of agreement where, for example, one of the things in the draft is if CRPR is using a facility and there's damage beyond normal wear and tear, that they would pay for it to repair it. It's I think just a good neighbor document, but we will proceed, and I know they're very thrilled, Dr. O'Donnell, to start to be able to use the spaces again.
I can only imagine.
They're pretty excited, so. Okay, and then, by the way, so just as a part of the report, April 1st, I believe, is the date that SCASD has said facilities to outside users, is going to be available. And once that date was announced, I know people were really happy, so. Okay, and then number 3 is sort of an interesting, quirky, historical little thing that we have here. There is a 1976 facility use agreement for the community field tennis courts. And this, not a lot of people know about this because this is from 1976. But there is this agreement, and nobody knows what's going on with it right now because it's been so long since anybody has executed this agreement. And so basically it says that during school hours up until 6 p.m., the school district has first priority over the use of the tennis courts, and then after that, it's CRPR, and the maintenance is funded by the borough. However, I've spoken with some people who've been around longer than I have, and they have said that that's not happened in many, many years. So it's sort of an interesting question, and at the Parks Authority meeting, everybody was kind of talking in circles, and so I had suggested that possibly SCASD might want to ask Dr. Etter to take a look at the contract and just let us know what's going on with this contract. So anyway, that's out there.
I propose we retro invoice them for the last,
Why,
I think Donna would agree with me. And see
Gretchen, I have a
if
question.
that flies.
Why is that coming up now?
It's coming up now because the director of Parks and Rec brought it to the attention of the Parks Authority and wanted to investigate. I'm guessing that came from recommendations from that master plan, from that comprehensive plan for Parks and Rec. And so Pam Salakongas, the director of CRPRA, has a long list of things that she's trying to tackle from that comp study. And this is one of those old documents that just kind of, popped up and was brought to our attention. So interesting question. Where was this?
I think with those being lighted courts, they're really nice, and they'd probably like dibs on them. So maybe the MOU, I mean, they're very popular, obviously, where they set with all the people who live around them and the student housing too, so.
Okay, so that is the tennis court, and then courts. Oh, and then I wanted to mention, because this is kind of neat, and I didn't know how many people knew this detail, but I've been giving updates about the Action Sports Park, and I did read in the latest memo on that they're suggesting SCASD colors be used in the skate park. So they're suggesting blue and white for Penn State, and then maroon and gray for SCASD, and I just thought that was kind of cool. So I thought I would let everybody know, and that they're working on funding for that right now. So, but it seems like it's coming along. Okay, and then the last thing that I wanted to.
Where's that going to be located, the skate park?
High Point Park above Stratford Drive.
And it has really cool plans if anybody is interested in skateboarding. Take a look at the website because it's really cool. I know you are, Dan. Okay.
My inner 16-year-old is so jealous.
And then the last item that I wanted to communicate is the solar purchase power agreement, what's going on with that currently. And so basically, it's moving along, and there is a working group meeting on Wednesday. And at this coming Wednesday, at that meeting, there will be an update from the project management team to the entire working group. And in that update, we'll be developing a project timeline. And I was thinking I would go ahead and email these, especially the timeline. I know SCASD board members have always been really interested in the timeline on this, and obviously it's been changed a lot with COVID. So I will email that updated timeline so that everybody has a good handle on that. So the timeline, the details for the request for proposal process, and they will have to get a specific energy information from all the various entities. And even though I will email it, I'll just tell you right now, the drafting of the RFP is happening up until about the end of May, and then that will be released. The RFP will be released around the end of June. And so that's sort of a broad timeline. And what's happening next specifically after this working group meeting on Wednesday is on March 28th, there will be a presentation, not sure who, it might be me, and that will be at the general forum. And that obviously will be on CNET, and so anybody who wants to get more information about it can watch that. And then also here at our board meeting on April 4th. And I know Randy will be presenting most of that, I think, because he's been the lead person on that. And the intention is that because these are both going to be on CNET, the COG and the meeting here, that anybody from any of the entities will be able to get full information on the progress of the SPPA, because that will be available publicly. So rather than us going and presenting to all the different entities over and over, we thought this would streamline it to just do these two. And then, but we have offered many times that should any board want us to come and be there to answer questions at those board meetings, there are several of us in the project management team who are more than happy to do that. But obviously, Peter and I will be here for ours, so we'll be here anyway to answer questions. And that is everything. That was a long COG update. I'm done.
Great, thanks, Gretchen. So at this time, we have time for public comment. Each individual will be allotted up to 3 minutes as time permits for items related to board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. For action items, public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item as required by school code. If additional time is necessary, the board may consider reopening public comment after board business is completed or during the next meeting. As a reminder, public comment is a chance for community members to share their thoughts with the board. It is not a time for the board to answer questions or engage in conversations. If you can always email the board at all-board@scasd.org. So we do have a scheduled public meeting on March 29th from noon to 1 p.m. at Memorial Field, where community members may come and have conversations with board members, and we welcome you to join us at that time. So it seems we have no attendees in person this evening, so I'm going to go and look on the Zoom and see if we have any hands raised. So would anyone like to make public comment from the Zoom participants? If you would, please raise your hand, and I'll call on you to speak. I'm not seeing any hands. I'm going to give you one more couple seconds to make sure we don't have any delays in our feed. So again, time available for public comment. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so we'll move on with the agenda. Up next, we have routine approvals. I'd like to accept a motion to approve the routine approval list as presented, with the exception of the removal of item B.
So moved.
Second. That's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Yeah.
I have one question. On 5H, the technology routine approval, I just want to confirm an amount. Looks like the fourth bullet, agile bits for IT password management renewal in an amount not to exceed. And it has either 2,400 or 24,000, I'm not sure, because there's a comma, but then there's too many zeros. So can someone answer how much that's actually supposed to be? Does that make sense?
Yeah, let me see if Justin Hetrick is with us. There he is.
That's what it was, but I thought I should be sure. Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that. Anybody else here at the table? I see Laurel has her hand up as well. Laurel, you had a question?
Yes, I had that same one, so thank you, Deb. And I also was wondering about the bullet after that, which is the maintenance agreement for my school books. And I thought we had talked about this relatively recently, but when I checked my notes, all I could find was back in, I think, 2019, and the rate had been 3.95. So this says the rate had been lower, but now it's higher. And I was trying to get find out more about this, because I think I had heard that now parents have to pay per transaction. I thought I remember discussing it, but I couldn't find the details. So could you just clarify what's up with that?
Sure. We had signed an agreement, you're right, back in 2019. And it was 3.75 at that point. And then what you're probably thinking is there was some news at one point that Heartland had raised their prices, and it had not affected us at that point. But they had recently just re-raised them again, and that's what this is for. Basically, what they're trying to put us in is the 4.6 with the 40 cents per transaction charge, and what we're working to negotiate with them is the 4.9% per transaction. Currently, our average costs of a charge is $20. So the flat 40 cents rate is actually a higher percentage charge than the 4.9 would be. So that's why we're trying to get locked in at that fixed rate rather than trying to pass that 40 cents on. And typically we're only doing that for certain store items, so Roar store things or technology purchases. It doesn't have any impact to food service purchases.
That, Laurel, because I know that was.
Because it was a 5-year contract and I did not read the small print, but did it allow in there periodic raises?
Yeah, I believe it did. Yeah, it wasn't a 5-year for their side of things. It's not a software we pay for. It's a credit card charge. So basically, times being what they are, they've seen increases, so they obviously have to pass that along. We're seeing that across any merchant because we did reach out to make sure it was competitive. So,
Well, I appreciate your clarifying it, and also you're doing the work to try to get the cost down lower. Thank you.
yep.
So this change really just affects technology and like the merchandise through the school store, not deposits for meal plans. So just so that that's clear for community members. Okay. Any other questions or discussion on routine approvals? Okay. Is there any public comment on routine approvals? Okay. Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Vader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney? Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Okay. That item is passed. Moving on to action items, we'll now take up what was item 5B from the Culture, Climate, and Learning Committee meeting minutes, shown in attachment 5B. Do I have a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Sorry. Laurel, anybody else? Okay, Laurel?
Yeah, I had sent a note in to the members of the committee who were there at that meeting. I first talked with Dan, who was chair, and with Amber, because she had been at it, to say that I remembered saying that I was not in favor of moving this to be an action item this time, but that I'd said it should be a discussion item. And originally, the minutes had said that the committee members were in agreement that the contract this is the performance factor contract, should be added to the March board meeting for discussion and approval. And I asked that the words "and approval" just be struck. And instead, it was changed to be moved for action, which also doesn't actually reflect things, in that what I suggested alternatively was just to say that the majority of people present agreed it should be for action or something like that, because I very clearly had said that I did not think it should be an action item today. So for those who were not there, as well as anyone who may be watching, I wanted to make that clear that I had requested that it be a discussion only item for today.
Laurel and I discussed this earlier today, and as the chair, I, in hindsight, could not recall how that ended, because this was at the end of the discussion. My sense of it was we ran around the horn among the board members who were present, and I think we'll be in the same place either way. But in hindsight, I was trying to recall if I invited Laurel to offer her recommendation one way or the other. We were getting a straw poll, basically, for the members who were present about presenting this item regarding the strategic planning document that we'll see later in the agenda. We were discussing it in terms of whether we were willing to introduce it as a potential action item in that discussion. And among those who were present, the conclusion was, or the recommendation was, we would move it to action. So I did not at the time, I don't recall at the time whether I had a presence of mind to ask Laurel, since she was calling it remotely. And that's the glitch in all this. I think in either case, we have the item on the agenda today, and it really reflects the majority opinion in that discussion in terms of the way it's presented on the agenda. So I think it's an acceptable outcome, though I have to apologize to Laurel in particular for not engaging her directly at the time we had that discussion in the committee meeting.
Okay, so of committee members, is there any objection to adding the words "the majority of those present at the committee"? So,
No.
if
No
not,
objection.
okay, so we'll amend those minutes with that language. Is there any other questions or discussion? Okay. Any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, we can have a roll call vote.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Dr. Buck,
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney, Dr. Anderson,
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes. Okay. All right, so forgive me, with the alteration, I'll try to get the letters right for the following agenda items. So, agenda item 6B is a motion to approve cost sharing of a high school traffic light study, and this is shown in the new attachment 6B.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion on this item?
I have one question.
Sure.
It's clear that the original concern was about making left turns out of each side of the campus, but will the traffic study also look at making left turns into the campus during the traffic study? Like, is that part of the study that they'll just look at the traffic flow in general? Because I know in the morning, making the left turn in is really hard as well.
Yeah, they'll look at the whole intersection.
That's what I figured. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Okay, is there any public comment? I didn't miss anything. Any public comment on this item?
Can I
Oh,
say? public
absolutely,
comment?
of course you
I
can.
just want to say really quickly that this was discussed initially, that I heard about it. It happened before that, but at a student meeting at the high school. And I was at the safety table, and it was just student after student after student came to that table and talked about this. And told me that they had written a petition, and they seem very well organized. And so anytime that I hear a student say, well, what we say doesn't matter, this is now on the agenda. So thank you to those students, and know that your voices really do matter.
Yeah. And this is an investment from both the borough and ourselves to share costs to make sure that we can get this as safe as possible. Yeah, for student drivers, it's really important that intersection be simple to navigate. Okay, last call for public comment on this item. All right, then we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Buck,
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney. Yes. Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Moving on, agenda item 6C is a motion to approve the purchase of a Hunter alignment machine for the CTC Auto Tech. This is shown in attachment 6C.
So moved.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion on this item? Okay, seems pretty straightforward. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney. Yes. Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Okay, that motion is passed. Next up, agenda item 6D, a motion to approve the highest bid with Sage Resources to perform Memorial Field sound system upgrade. This is shown in attachment 6D.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion on this item?
Quick question. It says that if it's not ready by graduation, they'll have a temporary one that's included in the base bid. But if it is ready, that bid will be deducted?
It will not. It's a good faith effort by the contractor to make sure that we have a good system for graduation.
Okay.
They're the same contractor that actually provided the rental last football season. So it's the same system, they still have it. So if they can't get the parts in, they would donate the rental.
Okay, thank you.
I think the key for this, when we did the project, the sound system, the attempt was internal to try to save money.
Yeah.
And it's not as good as it needs to be. I think we all agree that. So it wasn't part of the project. So we're sorry to be here doing this. We wish it was spot on right from the start when the project was completed. But so thanks, Mike, for trying to, we did say it would be better for next graduation. That's for sure.
Can you describe what needs to be better? Because that's that I just don't understand exactly.
Both size and location of the speakers, the biggest items. I've been hitting that. I don't know.
There's pockets in the stadium where you really can't hear.
Yeah, I think right before the new board members joined us, we had touched on this at one point earlier about the need, the more details about the need. Not that you're welcome to ask any questions, I just,
Yeah,
Sure.
it's pretty poor.
we heard about this
Yeah,
before.
and at games, you can't hear the announcer or once there's a crowd in the stadium, it's pretty bad. So we had a makeshift in there so that it would be better this year. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so previously there were smaller speakers kind of around, almost at field level. And now with the acoustic engineers involved, their design has larger speakers actually up on top of the press box coming down, so that, number one, we don't interfere with people close to the speakers, so it's too loud, and then also we'll be able to hear across at the visitor side as well.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
I think we have a question from Ms. Zidney.
Yes, it was actually more of a comment in the future, just because I think it's good practice for transparency. Since this was a bid item, if at some point we could, in general, when we have these things, even though it was the lowest bid, if the other bids could be put out there unless there's a particular reason not to, just so people see who else bid or what those bids were.
There were no other bids.
Okay, well, that makes that easy then. Thanks.
Okay. All right. No other discussion? Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney? Yes. Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Vader?
Yes.
Ms. Brannon?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Okay, the motion is passed.
Thanks, Mike.
Next up, we have Agenda Item 6E, is a motion to approve an agreement with Performance Fact, Inc. for strategic planning. This is shown in Attachment 6E.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that item has been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion on this item?
Any follow-up from CCL that you want
Yeah,
highlighted, Dan?
Yeah, I think, well, one of the things that has occurred to me is in terms of this particular program, this particular initiative, is that we not only have a timeline for working with Mutiu, the consultant, and establishing a stepwise approach to one, defining what this phase of strategic planning will look like and what we're hoping to accomplish in terms of the people involved and the tasks involved. But also, when it's all said and done, also to acknowledge, I think, in terms of our discussion during CCL, that the intent behind this is to adapt and to the extent necessary, revise the strategic plan that is more, that reflects the needs, the current needs of our students, perhaps the impact of the pandemic, but also the introduction of equity into our work with students, and incorporating those needs in addition to or in alignment with what has gone on before. One of the, and what we did not talk about in CCL, but something that's occurred to me since, has been the importance in terms of setting this up, that we not only arrive at, and as Dr. O'Donnell has said, we'll have a document that reflects our work in the present time to anticipate future needs and to and to adjust or reorient our work to address those needs. But it should not be something that just sits on the shelf. It should not be something which just gathers dust. And so, and I'm not suggesting anything about the past, but in terms of looking forward to the future, it might be helpful to have a quarterly or semi-annual update in terms of the goals established in the strategic plan that are brought to the board for review. And might not have happened perhaps with the full board. It might occur through CCL. But I'm just in terms of allowing us to keep the strategic plan in the front of our minds. It might be helpful to have that kind of conversation as time goes on. So, and I'm open to any other ideas from other members of the committee that came from that discussion.
I do think some of the key updates to the plan that should be changes would obviously be how our equity work is foundational
Yes.
to where we're striving to improve. And although I do think the current plan does break down measures per demographic category, we need to make that more visible. So at this coming week's meeting, we do have the Center for Education and Civil Rights. It's at Penn State, and it's, I think, a more responsive, agile partnership to help us with more transparency and to help us with the data as well. So that's exciting. Erica Frankberg is part of that, and she'll be here. So I think that's exciting. I also think student and employee well-being will likely come out of steering conversations, community conversations, but I think the most engaging part for the average person in our school community will be talking about what we should be doing.
Yep.
Or what should our annual priorities be looking like more.
The goal-setting side.
Hitting the road.
True.
Rubber meets the road stuff. People enjoy telling us what to do. And that's exciting, collaborating with people and hearing them talk about what's most important. Because the reality is, if we're going to focus our energy, we need a compass to make sure that we're on the same page, and people need a voice in that. And so, I think that's the goal of the process. We want to use Mutiu a little bit differently this time, but with the community access and maybe a couple community forums, but I think we should talk about that at a specific work session with him to iron out what we think we liked from the last time we worked with him, which I think was a little better than the first time. And then also what we would want to see differently this time. And I think at CCL we should have some discussions, because I have some thoughts about a steering team concept where we identify who should be on that. The board has to approve that for the comprehensive plan requirements with the state. But then also, how do we utilize all of the different engaged groups in the district, whether it's the equity work groups, our different community advisory committees to the board, and obviously we have a lot of student groups as well that are pretty active. So we still have a board work session that Lynn's working on scheduling for this spring. So that may be also an opportunity to plug in with our high school students and engage with them around this as well.
And I think that it's among the responsibilities in this process, a portion belongs to the board as well, to assist with this, to help kind of follow work to the extent necessary, to oversee reminders about what's needed, or what has been agreed to, and what's needed next. So I think I guess sometimes I feel as a board member, one of 9, even though I've got a additional responsibility with the CCL committee, I feel that sometimes I'm inclined to be myself too passive, and so, but I think the strategic plan is something that requires active engagement. And if I'm thinking in terms of my own role, to have the conversations with you, Dr. O'Donnell, and with others in the administration, just to be sure that I'm as up as I can be, and others of us can be, to recognize what the content of the plan and our role in terms of assisting and overseeing the progress and outcomes of the work that we're doing under the plan.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think Laurel had a comment to make. She was on the committee as well.
Yeah. Well, I had suggested, I think back in April when we talked about this first, that we look into doing some type of RFP to get some input from different people. That, of course, I would figure that Performance Fact would come into that. And I know I've suggested that often with things. I'd suggested it with the equity audit. And part of that is that I think it's transparent. It can give us ideas as different people bring forward suggestions for processes. And it also lets the community know that we've done a good job. We haven't just picked someone because we like them or we met them somewhere or we heard from the next district over that they were good or whatever reason it might be, some of which may be very good reasons, but it helps put it out there in front of everybody. So we've worked with Performance Fact and UGO for 2 cycles now. I actually thought the first cycle, because I've been privileged to be with both of them, the first time I was a pretty new board member. And then last time the entire board was part of the steering committee. But it seems to me that when we've had someone work with us twice and twice we've had a plan that at the end of it, we didn't follow up on. We didn't do that type of keeping up and updating that Dan was recognizing, that for whatever reason, it just doesn't seem to get us to a point where we should be with plan. And a set of new eyes is always helpful. It's a different thing. So with the audit, we've often wanted to keep the same people, assuming they were good, because there's so many intricacies in audits that it may be worth keeping someone. This is a little different. Also, there is no, and I had forwarded, though it was fairly last minute to board members, just for your information for the future even. The last recommendation for this contract, when we'd gotten it in 2017 or 16, did include a timeline, and I sent that is often included in this type of contract, that there's a timeline already worked out, as opposed to making a contract and then going and coming up with a timeline. That really concerns me as well. So I think we need to be more transparent. I think we need to talk about what the process will be and be very upfront with it. I certainly hope that we will hear more from people. I would note that in the last contract, we did have on there specifically stakeholder meetings. We just didn't do them. So again, I want to make sure that I'm not saying that it's necessarily a problem just with the facilitator. I think it's the combination of our team and that team that just seems to let important pieces slide.
So I was also on the committee, and I'll share my thoughts after we hear from, if there's any other board members that would like to share. Okay. So I wasn't present the first go around with this consultant, but I was the most recent one. And personally, I felt that the experience was really high quality. I felt that we had a fairly comprehensive cross-section of all different kinds of communities or interests within our community at the engagement sessions. We had about, I think, Dr. Arnaud, like 50 or more different community members, or was that total members of the steering team?
I think we were close to 60 members of the steering team, yeah.
Right, so the steering team was made up of administrators, teachers, other district employees, but also parents, students, business members. We had members of the library, the county library system, and a variety of other engaged community groups. I guess I'd also like to say that, doing strategic planning in this manner is above and beyond what's required of us by the state. And it is an opportunity for us to be ambitious about what we think our school district and want our school district to be. In the subgroup that I was part of was working on, we crafted the language about students, achieving a meaningful life. When we had a lot of debate and conversation about even that particular word. What is a purposeful or meaningful life, and what does that mean for students, and is that the right word or language? So I thought it was a very rich experience. I think it gave us some really high thought process opportunities to really think in positive ways about our students. So Personally, I'm more than happy to work with this consultant again. I think that our goal is not to recreate the wheel, but to tweak and adjust moving forward. And so for that reason, I think it makes a lot of sense to continue to work with the same consultant as they're deeply familiar with this comprehensive plan that we've already established. So those are my personal thoughts. I'm happy to support working with him again. Peter, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, well, I'm really glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear the other thoughts. You know, strategic plans are only as good as the folks who sort of drive their implementation and the accountability that we hold people to them. And so I would say that if members of the board or the public think that we're not doing it, that we as a board would need to follow through on making sure that there's more accountability and oversight for it. And I think that this looks great, and I look forward to working with them.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the plan as a compass. I do think where we could have done better, if you said, what could we do in reverse? The measures, you know, we had a change in director of our tech world, and that person had been, you know, trying to get us to a point where we had a dashboard, and that didn't happen. And now we have a different person running point on that with Justin. But I do think we have to come to terms as a board. How are we going? What is most important to us? Measuring it, because sometimes people want to talk about data, they want the highest scores, but yet they don't want us to be about the test. So we got to talk about what do we want and what do we want to see. Our annual goals that we do with the board every year are quite thorough. There's a lot there, and I think the challenge of focus here is why we try to go through that process to give our team a sense of what the expectations are. And then as we go through each year, there's always new things. There's a lot of bright people in our community, and there's a lot of good ideas. And I think our challenge is focus. And I think the plan does help us. Obviously, the last couple of years have been what, you know, it is what it is. I do think we have, despite some of our challenges, moved forward with some strides with our equity work and some of the strategies related to that we've prioritized. We have continued to move our curriculum cycle forward, which is a key component of a high-quality education system if you have rich curriculum for students. And, you know, I think that's something in 2011 when we began working with each other where we didn't have a curriculum office, we didn't have a curriculum process. And, you know, we're close to getting through the iteration on the cycle, so to speak. So that no one curricular area sits still for too long. And I think the process that we've developed that is in line with your policy does have some quality steps in it, including capitalizing on the research partners that we have at the university. So I think, you know, change systemically is a real challenge, and having the board help to weigh in on that is key. And I do think strategic planning is important, and I think the talent Mutiu has isn't on the execution. That's on me, that's on us. It's really on hearing people out and being heard. You know, if I was facilitating, one, I'm not nearly as talented as him, but two, I want to listen to people too. I don't want to be facilitating. So for me to engage and learn from the community, I think having somebody who steps in with that skill set is a real help to me and to us as a board. So.
Yeah, and just one additional reflection. I think the pandemic notwithstanding, and I don't know how it compares to the strategic plan 3 times. Well, this would be 2 times ago, but this most recent strategic plan, I think, was pretty lofty, and a lot of the discussions were very much about this is what we want to value. So there was a push-pull between what we want to value and then how do we measure it? How do we determine whether we're successful at that? And the consultant, Mutiu, was very good about saying, you know, you want to think about that as you set those goals, but we also didn't want to hem in the goals. And so that was a real challenge in how do we decide that this is something really important and something we want to strive for, and yet we're not sure how we measure that. And so we did get stuck with some fungible kind of goals that were hard to measure, that we had a lot of discussion about our annual surveys and stuff as being potentially a means to gauge that. But we were learning a lot about that annual survey to students and teachers because it turns out some things weren't measuring what we thought. So there was a lot of growing going on, and to Dr. O'Donnell's point, we were still at early stages technologically to be able to parse out a lot of data in the ways we wanted to. So we knew we were working towards that when we made those goals, but we didn't have all the tools we needed in order to examine that data at a really critical level. So we've grown in that area too to try and get to those places and do it.
Question though, it's just, what happened like the couple of years before that? I thought like the first one would be kind of the growing phase.
I wasn't here then, so that's the one I have a harder
No,
time knowing about.
I do think, well, getting the curriculum cycle moving in an assessment plan. So now, which we didn't have, is published, we have a district assessment plan. So we have plenty of information regarding student learning. And as I had mentioned, taking a look at where the inequities exist, as well as strengths and weaknesses in regard to the district and the standards. I think, although we've been utilizing that information at the building level with our building level teams, I think getting better as a system and reporting it outwardly as a district is needed.
And it's been changing because we've implemented MAP at more and more levels than we had initially when the strategic plan was made. So our data source has grown a little bit throughout the strategic plan.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely has. And that's also enabled us to do different things to make sure students are getting respectful tasks, including how we're screening students for special education, gifted services, to make sure we're not missing where we could do better and be more responsive. So I do think the building level teams, the building improvement teams, especially with what we've done in K-5, have moved on utilizing those assessments especially. I think as a system, what do we want to report out? And I think those measures of the plan are the key. Some of the goals were really difficult to, and we never ironed it out. There's no question achievement growth, achievement gaps. Those aren't, we have that data. We have been monitoring, we can measure. I think reporting it out, putting it on the website is something that we should do a little more. Now, a lot of that information also exists on the state website if you want to use the state assessments. I think there's a lot more than simply those the state assessments in those particular grade levels. And obviously we lobbied the state pretty hard, at least our voice, to consider a tool like the MAP to replace the PSSA, because it's a more respectful experience for a student, but also gives standards-based feedback. So it's not a grade level. If you are successful with the content, it's more complex. If you're not, it doesn't put a kid out, and it gives them a less complex experience so that you can see where they are succeeding with the content. Anyway, that's going off tangent, but that's a tool we like to use. We think it's more valid and reliable for helping our faculty.
Is that helpful?
It is.
Okay. Laurel, I think you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, I want to echo something that both you said, Amy, and that Bob said in terms of the data, that it's important that we're not just doing test scores. And I agree with you. We've talked about that a lot as a board. And in fact, that was part of what I thought was good about this plan, is that there were measures that we need to figure out a way to measure them, but that did not just look to how many people scored what on what test. One of the ones that I remember from back almost before I joined the board, because I remember, and it's now been on both plans, is very simply what percentage of our kids are involved in an extracurricular activity, just as a way of checking engagement. And somehow I've been on the board 10 years and we still don't know that. And I really hope that we find that out soon, so that we can adjust for those kids and help engage them. The piece that I'm wondering about, you've talked about this as tweaking and an update and all, but we do have a state requirement, whether we like it or not, to turn in a comprehensive plan that had originally been due back in November, and then they updated it to March. And then when I looked, they in October said, no, it won't be till next August. So it's been updated, but we still need to get it in. And I'm wondering who is going to do that. That's only 5 months from now. Are you thinking that this is a question for Bob, are you thinking this process will be done in time to have this inform that comprehensive plan, or will somebody else do the comprehensive plan, or how do those two mesh up?
Well, we're hoping to have this completed by then. in regard to what requirements we have with the state, Laurel. So that's our hope.
If we are talking about trying to have a process that we get community engagement and involvement in, a 5-month process, 3 of those months being in the summer, I just don't think it's realistic. And that's,
most comprehensive plans that districts do are pretty limited. And, when I got here, there was a strategic plan that wasn't on any website. People didn't see, we didn't talk about the goals. And that was, the minimalist role with completing what, I've seen, I think, 4 different state systems for the requirement. I don't think that's the approach we want to take. I think we want a more explicit approach with our community that's a little more visible than just completing a portal on the state's website. So to your point, if we don't reach where we want to be, then I think I would clearly make a request to the board that if we're not there yet, would you approve A, B, and C for submission? I think the growth in the gap goals will probably still be something we want to see. I mean, they are parts of, I think, Equity's foundation, as I said earlier, and I think closing achievement gaps. We want to raise where students are, the ones who are not performing even close to grade level, and then we want everybody to have respectful tasks and growth. So that's what I would do. I would ask the board to approve what we know is core to the plan. If we're not done with, say, facets of an employee well-being component, then I would ask you to submit that at a later time. Does that sound reasonable? If we need time in the fall, Laurel?
That was part of our
I
discussion.
don't know that we have much choice unless they postpone it again. So I just was trying to figure out how the two would mesh and whether you were thinking that this would be done by then or whether it would be a different submission. So I think you've answered that, and I appreciate the answer.
I mean, I think when we've been working on an equity action plan, so I do think when we talk about student mental health, we have some things for people to take a look at and respond to. I think right now with what we've seen in our community, even before the pandemic, I think that first goal in our plan will absolutely change, and I think people will buy into that. I think the details of what we want to do over the years is obviously the work that we're going to do. I don't think you have to have all the annual work ironed out when you approve a plan and its goals.
Okay. All right.
I mean, we know so much more now than we knew 4 or 5 years ago. So I don't want to.
Yeah, we have a richer, broader, deeper set of baseline information in terms of where things are now, which goes well beyond anything we've had before. In terms of mental health, in terms of academics, there's just a lot that we have available that will help us. And the only thing I wanted to add to this was to just simply just acknowledge a reality. When you're working with a consultant, it's about the work. Consultation involves 2 working partners. It involves the consultant and it involves the consultees, the people receiving the services. And I think rather than starting over with someone brand new, I think this decision for me is an easy one in terms of approving this contract, because it really allows us to have that prior knowledge, as a consultant, have prior knowledge of our system, and we also understand and perhaps are a little bit ahead in terms of understanding how Mutiu functions and what value he brings to the process. And so I think there's in my view, a strong argument that supports engaging him again to support us in this. But as just to reinforce something that Laurel has said, if we don't make the deadline, I think there are ways in which we can, in a sense, turn in the outline, if you will, that the state mandates, but then continue with our work on the strategic plan if it happens to go beyond that date.
I agree. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, just to add some information about the whole PDE process. For the first part is the strategic plan, which is the huge comp plan, which is the school district plan. That's the overall goals, your big goals. The work is done when you come up with your school plans, which involves stakeholders. So those school plans do not have to be done right away. It's just the overall comprehensive plan that needs to be done. And then we take that plan and basically do the work, which is developing the school plans. And each school will develop a stakeholder group that will help implement those goals that have been created by the overall big strategic plan committee. Okay, so there's a number of processes that occur, and it's going to take time, but the overall what PD requires you to do will be done and be able to be done based on, because our goals are good. I mean, they will be good forever because they're that type of goals that we have created. It's just creating the benchmarks that will then be pushed on to the schools, and the schools will do the work and implement in those and come up with their own goals and priorities. Okay.
So when MUTU comes in, if approved, then what we'll do is we'll have a work session to map things out and get into it, and then also see what the board thinks about aspects of community engagement around it too, because that was something I don't think last time we were as explicit beyond the large steering team.
Great.
Thanks, Curtis.
Thanks, Curtis. That's really helpful. Laurel, did you want to make another comment, or does your hand still up?
Just a quick question. Is that school piece a new piece this time around? Because I don't remember it from last time, so I was just checking.
He's nodding yes.
Yeah, and in the portal, it requires it, so, but each school has a separate.
New since last time, yeah. That's what Curtis said, yes. New since last time.
They moved the whole reporting system to a new tool. It's part of the Future Ready Index tool that the state has.
Okay, great. All right, I
Thanks,
think
CJ.
we've wrapped up
And
discussion on this.
CJ runs point on that.
He's got all the details. So is there any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zinni? Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Krabbaport?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Moving on. Agenda item 6F is a motion to approve the 2022-2023 Central Intermediate Unit Number 10 General Operating Budget. This is shown in attachment 6F.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion?
I just want to kind of give an overview of what this is about, and Jackie, feel free to chime in if anything occurs to you that would add value to what how we're advising other members of the board. One of the things to say right off the bat is, in terms of your decision, if you happen to vote yes or whatever, even vote no, if you could complete the form, because that needs to be sent up to the intermediate unit as part of the process, the state mandated process for approval of IU budgets. So just be sure to fill that in before you leave. That'd be great. And pass it on to Lynn. The IU budget is different from the school district budget. It's structured differently. It deals with a much more narrow set of budget categories. The intermediate unit has maybe through its operations essentially has funds that are 10 times the size of this general operating budget. So if you see the total for the budget being $2,186,000, the actual funds that are funneled through the intermediate unit in the form of grants and other types of revenue, that will be 10 times that, 25 million or so in total. So this is a very narrow amount of money that's in the general operating budget, and it really represents, let me get to some of the details on this. It represents basically the or the revenue that is not part of the large budgeted amounts that are derived from projects and contracts and those things that are they're mandated in a sense from the state and received from the state. So it includes fee-for-service programs where we have agreements with member school districts to deliver certain services for a certain cost, and indirect costs and administrative fees that accompany the state and federal grants that we receive. So we have to account for those additional funds, and it happens through the general operating budget. This IU is one of a handful of IUs that does not receive any excess, any direct subsidy reductions or any revenue from member school districts as a general form of service support. It does receive funds from member school districts for specific dedicated interventions and programs that are requested by the intermediate, by the member districts, but it doesn't. The IU does not otherwise receive district funds. The funds that are received or described in this budget address a portion of the following categories: the work of the executive director, the work of the curriculum and school improvement section, work of the business office, an internal services fund, technology, building and maintenance, and a program called the Gallery, an arts and education program, the Galaxy Arts and Education Program. So it's a rather narrow band of programs within the IU that are funded through, portions of which are funded through this budget. The numbers add up. We just like the district, the IU receives very favorable ratings from the auditor. We have the same auditor that works with the school district. So I'm really confident that this is an accurately described and reasonable description of the work of the IU and its use of the funds that it's earning basically as in its role as a pass-through for project monies and such that come from various sources, most of them federal and state. So that's what I can share about it.
Okay, thanks.
Does that make sense, Jackie?
Yeah, nothing to add.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Are there any questions? Let me make sure I have. Okay, any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Sidney? Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brand?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Next up, we have agenda item 6. Yes?
Sorry. I meant to just double check. I will not be there to sign that. Is that still okay?
I can send it to you by email, and then you can scan it back to me? Or take, yep.
Okay. Next up, we have agenda item 6G, a motion to approve a sponsorship agreement with America's Carpet Outlet as shown in attachment 6G.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion on this item? Excellent. Seeing none, is there any public comment? None. Let's have a roll call vote.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brand?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Okay.
It's nice to see these sponsorships start up even though a little small.
Yeah.
Especially local businesses, it's good.
All right, moving on to agenda item 6H, a motion to approve a sponsorship agreement with State College Orthodontics PC. This is shown in attachment 6H.
So moved.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Any public comment? All right, seeing none, a roll call vote, please.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brand?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney? Yes. Dr. Anderson?
Yes. That motion is passed. Next up, agenda item 6I, a motion to approve an MOU with the State College Educational Support Personnel Association, as shown in attachment 6I.
So moved.
Seconded. That's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion on this item? Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Brand?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney? Yes. Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes. That item is passed. Moving on to agenda item 6J is a motion to approve a 5-year lease with Loggie Landon Public Finance for print shop equipment, as shown in attachment 6J.
So moved.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion on this item? Any public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney? Yes. Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brand?
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Moving on to agenda item 6K is a motion to reject bids for copier paper. This is shown in attachment 6K now.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
That's moved and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion on this item? Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney? Yes. Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brand?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
That item is, oh, sorry. That item is passed. Just started rolling out of my, off my tongue. Moving on to agenda item 6L is a motion to approve 2021-2022 expulsion waiver agreement 4.
So moved.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion on this item? Any public comment? We'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney? Yes. Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brand?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
That item is passed. Moving on to our final action item, agenda item 6M is a motion to approve 2021-2022 expulsion waiver agreement 5.
So moved.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion on this item? Any public comment? Then we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney? Yes. Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brand?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
All right, that concludes action items for this evening. Moving on to info discussion. I think we'll do the middle school and take a quick break after that before budget. Does that sound okay with everybody? Okay.
I know Chris Merritt's online, and Curtis obviously is with us, so.
Yeah, absolutely. I knew we wanted to, not that we want to make Donna wait forever, but I think we'll all need a quick break after this one. Okay, so information discussion, item A, middle school schedule, proposed grade 6 alignment. Go.
All right. So as you know, the district has been focusing this year aligning the middle school schedule. With the help of committee of teachers and administrators, we were able to do just that. Basically, we are proposing an alignment of the 6th grade schedule with the 7th and 8th grade schedule for the next school year. That's both time schedule and content and courses are considered. This change will provide opportunities for our 6th grade students and will alleviate all the current constraints in scheduling for our 6th grade students. This is per our discussion on our Cultural, Climate, and Learning Committee. Basically, we're asking for the board support as far as resources needed for the proposal, and at a future board meeting, we would talk about the curriculum revisions during that curriculum revision process. I have Brian Ishler and Karen Weiser and Chris Merritt, if you have any additional questions or you want to talk further about what we discussed at the CCL meeting.
Yeah, so this was something.
We discussed, right?
Yeah, we had discussed
Presented.
extensively and actually was also brought forward by the disability work group as an issue of concerns about the 6th grade schedule and the constraints, particularly for kids who need interventions, among other things, also for acceleration and other issues. So I think the conversation at CCL was really quite strongly supportive of the importance of this and the benefits it'll lend, especially as we roll out further with MTSS approaches, that'll really enable those to be more proactive.
Yeah, among the things that came up, at least it occurred to me that it's, in a sense, this structural difference between the 6th and 7th and 8th grade programs go back to the origins of the two middle schools, because it was the first intention behind, or first, one of the goals in terms of the ways in which the middle schools were originally organized was somehow to break out the organization, the schedules for sixth graders as being separate from the seventh and eighth, out of concerns about the perceived developmental mismatch between the two groups. But over time, I think what the district has learned is that there's much less differentiates a sixth grader from a seventh and eighth grader than we might have been concerned about to begin with. So I think among one of the examples of the advantage of this is helping the students in terms of transitioning from one grade to the next. I think from going to sixth to seventh, and also from eighth to ninth grade. In our discussion, we thought it would be facilitated by this change in the system, and as you're saying too, Amy, that this will really enable the system to be more effective and more efficient in terms of delivering interventions for students who need it, rather than being bound up or tied into required activities based on the scheduling system we have been following.
Yeah. And I know Curtis already knows I particularly love this possibility because I think it gives us an opportunity to have time and space in the schedule for health in sixth grade, which we have never had before and are, in my opinion, in dire need of.
I second.
Excellent. Who knew the two medical professionals would want more help? Shocking. Any other comments? So, I mean, while it's not in the board's purview whether to the schedule change, there will be issues that we'll vote on moving forward about allocation of resources for staffing and the curriculum changes that would be needed in order to implement this. So that's where our role would lie.
And Laurel has her hand up. She has
Oh,
two
thanks,
hands
sorry.
up, the electronic one and the real one.
Gotcha.
That's
Sorry
because
about
it
that.
sounded like you were moving on. I wasn't sure. I figured someone would eventually see it. Thanks.
Apologies. I've been trying to keep on top of that.
No, it's a hard job you're doing, so thanks. Yeah, I think that aligning the two schedules makes sense. We'd start on that middle school review, and then pandemic threw us off, and I hope we'll get back to that. But I think it makes a tremendous amount of sense for all kinds of reasons, including that one of our strategic plan goals was reducing transitions, making transitions easier for kids, and this will do that. The thing that really concerns me about this is that we basically are losing family consumer science, which to me is, and I speak as someone who actually never took it in high school because I was doing 2 foreign world languages, and so I made that choice. But when we talk about things that are real life skills for kids, that's in there. And we can have health talk about some of the stuff, but I think the training of a health teacher is often different than the family focus of an FCS teacher, what used to be called home ec. So that really concerns me. And I'm also wondering, because I know that some of this comes down to shifting personnel as retirements happen so that we can use those positions wisely. But who does that leave? At the high school, are we still going to be offering those classes, or are the kids going to have that opportunity in the future?
You had this at the meeting, I recall, and I think Mr. Johnson had filled you in that there would still be the same opportunities at the high school level, and there was not going to be any impact there. We covered that.
Correct.
Thanks.
Laura, when we bring the curriculum piece forward, I mean, Chris had spoken about the units of FCS, and it's a limited exposure. It's not a full year elective or special. But I think the unit that focused on relationships, I think would be something that would align pretty well with what's in health curriculum. But I do think if we'd like to have a side-by-side potential of what was it and what would it be, and we could visit that at CCL a little more depth than what you have here in the memo from the team. I don't know if I don't recall the specifics of that, but
I do.
Okay, because
Well,
Chris spoke.
Yeah, Chris certainly can speak to that, but I've had kids just recently go through that. So the two big topics then, and I recall was shared at the meeting, was there's nutrition components and healthy relationships. And certainly when we instituted the new health curriculum, I had poured through that pretty rigorously because it's a personal interest for me. And that is a big component of the new national standards, is a lot about information about healthy relationships. So there's really no reason, I don't think, that we can't expect a health teacher to cover that, as that's part of the national health standards as it is. And nutrition as well, I would expect would be pretty well in the wheelhouse of a certified health teacher. But Chris, certainly if you wanted to add anything, I'd welcome you to chime in.
Sorry, my video is not working right now. Yeah, so what you said is pretty accurate. They do cover 2 units, a food science unit, which does include some nutrition, and they also cover interpersonal communications. And we do have a plan to incorporate the standards that are taught from FCS in some other courses.
Because they cover some stuff about like social media use and other things, so I could see that easily fitting into some of our academic literacy curriculum as well.
If I could also add on to that.
Absolutely, Luke.
Like from a student perspective, I think talking about a lot of the things that are covered in FCS with like relationships and whatnot, talking in the context of a health class actually underscores the points it's making more than having it in an FCS class, because it puts it adjacent with some of the things we consider kind of classical health issues. So I think actually kind of putting those FCS topics in health classes would be more beneficial for students, because they will learn those in the context of health as opposed to FCS, which in my experience with students isn't a class that tends to leave any lasting effect when it comes to like content that is learned. So I think putting that in a health class is beneficial. Yeah.
Thanks, Luke. I appreciate you chiming in. I didn't mean to leave you hanging over there on the end, so thanks for sharing that. Is there any other questions or comments?
Oh, you first.
No.
Okay. Just for the benefit of the board members who weren't in the meeting too, I just wanted to add that there have been a lot of benefits mentioned for students, but this plan also provides benefits to teachers as well. And that there will be a lot of advantages to having all teachers at the middle school level on the same schedule. And I'll leave it at that and allow someone else to elaborate if they'd like, but I just wanted to mention that there is that benefit as well.
Yeah, well, we could have articulated planning time through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, which would be really important, especially as we've rolled out new curriculum. You know, we have a whole new curriculum in science that's all phenomenon-based. You know, having those teachers be able to have PLC, professional learning time together, would be really critical, I think, to continuing to improve that curriculum. Yeah.
Correct.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. Actually, that is a really important point.
It is important.
Yeah. And it also, the
Focus
other
on
difference was
students a
that we, rather than teaching 2 subjects, right?
Felt only
Then
to
teachers
teach
will
one.
only teach 1 subject. So rather than teaching science and math, they'll teach one or the other. So they'll really have the opportunity to hone in and focus on their craft in that area. So that's great. Okay. All right, I think we'll take a quick 5-minute break and we'll be back at about 8:45.
Thanks to the middle school principals and Chris for joining us.
Thank you.
I'd like to resume the March 21st, 2022 State College Area School District Board meeting. And so we're going to go on with information discussion, and we're going to have budget development with Donna Watson at the table to share about ESSER funding update, along with Jonathan Kling.
So on the front of the budget development update, I'm going to just touch on a few things that would be new requests. Now, they're not all fleshed out, and then Donna's going to take it from there. So I think it's, next slide, Donna.
Yep.
So in relationship to proposed additions and increases there, and we discussed this in budget development, one of the things that we do not have worked out completely is the student mental and behavioral wellness. So what we didn't want to do is put an arbitrary dollar figure in yet, but we're working on that with the team, having some voice from the IMH partners that we have, how this might best look, in particular in our K-5 schools. So that's going to need to be forthcoming just because we're not there yet. Middle school grade 6 teacher, this is related to the schedule piece. Middle school art teachers, increasing a couple teachers by a quarter FTE each, and that's part of the schedule piece. Same with the music. And the 2 science teachers, I'll let Jonathan give you an overview of why we're requesting those.
So as been discussed for many years, the concern that we have with students who are able in 6th grade, going into 6th grade, are able to skip over 6th grade science. Now we do hold them accountable for a summer program on their for math. So they go into that 7A math for 6th graders as a 7th grade or 6th grader. But that has created some inequities and some scheduling issues as students progress through the secondary schedule. So ultimately what we're proposing is to be able to align the math and science acceleration. I think this will have and also to be a little bit more transparent with the different pathways that students have. Again, once you get up into the high school and you have labs that are taking up extra periods of the day, and also trying to meet all the other expectations that you want. Science seems to be the one that's taken a little bit of step side for our advanced students as well. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to create those pathways, and this will align those opportunities for us.
And you have the next one, the gifted support.
With our universal screening, last year we did not do screening last year, so this year we did 2 grade levels, and we are still kind of backed up with all of that. Because of that, we're expecting we have about 85 students in 3rd and 4th grade that are moving forward to evaluation. So to be expected, to meet those specific needs in the elementary is going to require some additional support.
Next item relates to, looks like it'll end up being a part-time position in HR, and we have an increase with the Title IX requirements that we have. And we believe that HR will be the appropriate place to have that based. And we'd also like the role to be able to help out with recruitment, which does jive with what Jackie said. With so many less people getting education certificates, we've seen a great decline in pools of candidates. So we need to be more assertive in going out and conducting searches beyond simply postings. So especially with our efforts to diversify our workforce, our desire with our faculty and administration and our support staff is to reflect our kids. And so we've been working on that, and so that would be a part-time role, and it'd be a little bit of an increase of capacity in our pretty small HR function. And Linda can speak to that if you have any questions. Faculty staffing. Right now, our we have budgeted levels consistent with 21, 22. I thought, except it doesn't include all the PTSs this year with the students coming back from the pandemic. You have approved some predictable term substitutes that are beyond the prior year's contracts, and what we did. Use ESSER funds, I believe, to help us manage that and reduce class sizes in particular where we know we have higher needs student populations, but we also did it really across the elementary programs. So it wouldn't include those particular roles. So our contract levels will be consistent with basically the prior year. So what we believe we're going to need, and we'll be returning on this once we get a better sense of impacts of kindergarten registration. What do we believe we'll need as we look to the summer? Danielle's been working closely with all the elementary principals to roll the student grade levels forward. Secondary program is working with all the department coordinators and principals regarding all of the class sizes and course requests, and what might we need for some flexibility. Board members that have been around for years have seen us, and sometimes in August, because of some late shifts in enrollment, we've had to add a small number of elementary teachers in particular, because say a first grade class went to 27 kids in a class, and that's beyond our class size guidelines. So we'll come back to you on that with more specifics. So now I'm going to turn it over to Donna at this point. Thanks so much, Donna. I know Randy's over at the Borough Building. He's probably driving down College Avenue right now because I heard they just finished, but we're in good hands.
Thank you. So on this slide, what we show is what we had in expenses the last time we brought this to you in February compared to where we are now. So expenses are up $742,000. As Dr. O'Donnell mentioned, we have the proposed increases in staffing included. And then in addition, we did have some refining of the salary and benefit calculations, some increased security costs, transportation costs. These are the costs that our estimates needed to be increased some. Natural gas, and then while we had inflation, we are finding some of the inflation impacts to be higher than what we had originally, and especially in the IT area. Decreases, our actuary has provided some initial estimates of the health insurance, and they're lower than what we had originally, so we've reflected that. And then, as Dr. O'Donnell said, those last items are those remaining considerations that have not yet been incorporated in the budget. Next slide, please, Nabil. This is a summary. These are schedules that are also included in the attachments that we provided. So we refer to this as our comparative statements, because we show all of the different versions that have come to the board. And then in the last column, that's a comparison of where we are tonight versus the prior presentation. So you can see that revenues are up $209,000, expenses are up $742,000, and then our fund balance, the committed fund balance for the revenue shortfall, we're utilizing $663,000 more. So that the ending unassigned fund balance is up $59,000. That's to stay within we stay at 7.9%, staying within the 8% limit of the state for unassigned fund balance. And so that's the reason for that. But we'll talk about the details on revenue and expense on the next slide, please, Nabil. So this is revenue. I realize it's a little hard to see, but that's in your packet as well. The only changes in revenue really relate to the increase in retirement and Social Security revenue, and that's based on the change in the salary expense. And also you'll see a little bit more in the federal revenue, and that's based on the allocation, the usage of the ESSER funds. So as expenses change, so do the revenues in that utilization. Next slide, please, Nabil. On the expense side, on salaries, it's the change in the adding the positions, and then some refinement on the calculations. Health insurance, as we mentioned, is down. The PSERS and other benefits are related to the salaries. And then professional services reflects the athletic and security and SEAL and community service providers as well, whereas we utilize more of those, or at least we're intending to next year than we have previously. And then in supplies and equipment, that's where we reflect the IT and natural gas. The one decrease that wasn't mentioned previously is in food service. And Megan Shaper is with us tonight also, if anyone has questions or would like to hear more about her report. Food service in last year and in this year is anticipating having surplus, and therefore where the district would have had to have funded funded where the expenses exceed revenue in this upcoming year, they'll have surplus to use. We are anticipating not having that funding that you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting as well. And then again, showing the utilization of the committed fund balance at the bottom. Next slide, please, Nabil. This is a slide comparing the cumulative growth in revenues and expenses, and this is a snapshot of what things looked like before COVID. So if we go to, and so you can see that they were growing at a pretty equal rate. So Nabil, if you could switch to the next slide. This is now what we look like in our multi-year projection and the growth in those line items as of right now. This is actually a better look than, if you recall, what this looked like last year. The spread was a little bit more because our revenues have fallen off some during COVID, and part of that, a large part of that, was the tax increase, not increasing taxes the last couple of years. So we still have a lot of work to do, but it is getting better, and we'll wait and see then how for instance, we haven't increased we don't increase state revenue in the budget. That could be something that could help us. So we'll wait and see, but that's something we keep an eye on. And next slide, Nabil. We've looked at this slide in each meeting. This is a graph of our committed plus unassigned fund balance. The straight line you see is the target of the 8%. And then as we look at the lines, the bottom line, the blue line, is where we were predicting we would be when we looked at the budget last year. So this was in May. The next line was the preliminary budget. The orange line is where we are now, and the top line is where we were in February. So we have dropped down some, but this is where we look at the point where we drop down below that 8% target. We make it just about 5 years now, but this is where, again, we need to improve so that we can maintain that positive fund balance. Next slide, Nabil. And then as far as this is just next steps. The next board action would be May 3rd. That would be the proposed final budget. We have various meetings so before that and then after, and then the final budget adoption is targeted for June 10th. So this is the general funds presentation. Does there anyone have any questions? And again, we do have Megan Shaper with us virtually tonight, if anyone has any questions or would like her to run through her presentation quickly. And we also, the other attachments that were included, we do include all the comparative statements for the budget year and the projected year. There's comparisons of the projection to the budget, to the budget, to the budget, and then the multi-year projection. Food service and print shop, there's a report on print shop as well.
Any questions for? Okay. Megan, we're sorry that the federal government didn't do that. That's all I can say for you. After you've waited all night, is that we just feel bad. Really is disappointing that it makes it so difficult to help students.
I just want to, one of the things that Megan did talk about, having sat in on the meeting, on the finance meeting, was about the fact that with the past funding from the federal funding we've received, that placed the district in a pretty favorable position. But this will, and we have typically run food service at a loss, but this is going to return from what Megan can speak to this much better than I can. So I would just I guess ask her to offer her reflections on the impact of the legislative proposal that Jackie had mentioned earlier.
Megan, do you want to give an update?
Sure. Yeah, and actually, Jackie, I really appreciated you sharing that information at the start of the meeting. So for the past 2 years, we have had some great support from USDA in the form of waivers that not only provided additional funds for the meals that we're serving, but it gave us funds to serve every student meals free of charge to the family. It also provided a lot of flexibility for how meals were served. So last year, when we had so many students learning from home, we were able to send meals home with families. So the program that we ran handing out bags in front of the North Building was a result of those waivers. I forget how many waivers there actually are from USDA, but it is dozens and dozens that impact not only the funding, but provides schools flexibility, where a lot of schools are having problems with even just getting all of the food supplies that they need. So some of the waivers have to do with helping schools deal with those kind of things. So they have been really instrumental in helping schools operate well through the pandemic, and now hopefully as we're coming out of the pandemic. I think we were all hoping that they would extend them for one more year. I know within operations within the food service program, we're not feeling like we're out of the woods yet. It is very, very difficult to find all of the food and supplies that we need. We're paying a lot more for those items than we have in the past. And I know just talking to families, there are a lot of families who are finding this free meal for all program very, very helpful to them. It has just cut out the red tape of filling out paperwork. It's made people feel more comfortable participating in the program than they might have otherwise been. So it's just been really helpful, and we were hoping it would be extended for another year. It's looking pretty bleak at this point, but there are still some opportunities maybe for some things to happen. So keeping my fingers crossed and sending in a lot of letters to my legislators asking them to continue to support waivers. But at this point, we really felt it was best to move forward with our 2023 budget, assuming that those waivers would not be extended. So while we've had some very financially successful years last year and this year because of that extra funding, we are looking at a program loss for next year. And included in your packet is a memo for lunch price approvals for the 2023 school year. And we can wait on actually bringing that back for approval to see if USDA does come through or if Congress comes through with anything different. But at this point, we are planning that we will not have waivers for the 2023 school year.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, it's just disappointing. So, anything else, Donna, that you
No,
want
there's
to
a
share?
print shop report there as well, showing volumes and revenue and expenses. Those volumes are dropping off, so we'll see what happens with that's there if anyone has any questions for that as well.
Okay. All right.
Thanks, Donna.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, Donna. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, so moving on to board committee reports. Oh, wait, you have another one. I'm sorry.
Sure.
That's your one.
Funding update, yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. I only have one bullet point on your thing, so I apologize. So go.
So before you is just a memo that Dawn and I have been working on with lots of people working on the ARPESTER funding, including the programming that's happening K-12, as well as some changes that we've made just based on the initial grant that we wrote, and that's pretty typical. Just like the rest of our grants, there's changes that come up and through, including our processes and planning for what the future of it will look like. I think the one thing that we've struggled with is a lot of these programs and a lot of schools are having these conversations as well. We're meant to be targeted to really help support students. However, we know that this funding is only temporary. So a lot of the programming that we're building, we're trying to evaluate to, what is going to be able to continue versus what will not be able to continue and things like that. So we're hopeful that the success of the initiatives that we've started are going to be successful to be able to continue, but we also realize that they may have to be reflect on that and move forward. So. Are there any questions, anything specific to the memo? Comments?
Okay. Oh, Carleen?
No.
Oh, okay. Dan?
Yeah. Hey, John, good to see you. And you too, Donna. One of the things that as these requests have come to us over the last year and a half, and obviously reflecting in these requests for basically approval of services for support systems of various sorts. It could be academic, they could be behavioral, social, emotional, whatever. And there's a lot going on. There are a lot of moving parts. And, I can't, and I mentioned this too often, I guess, but having lived in that world, it's just, from the perspective of an individual practitioner, there are a lot of balls in the air in all this. I mean, all with good intentions. One of my questions about this, and it really relates to one of the avenues and one of the ways of thinking about our organization of all this, has been to how do we track how do we first identify the needs of the students, and particularly the gradations of need that students have? How do we track that? What kind of goal setting takes place, and how can we assure ourselves that what we're doing is working? These various pieces all have to mesh together somehow. They really need, and they need to be focused in terms of outcomes for kids, or else we'll never go off of this wheel, if you will. So I'm wondering, in terms of the MTSS process, for example, which relies on kind of a hierarchy of need, from those having the least need are in the core, those who have moderate degrees of need are at tier 2, at the second tier, and those in the greatest need are at tier 3. Is there a way in which, I'm wondering, has there been some consideration given to thinking about whether it's behavioral or academic or whatever, really identifying students that way, and then from that, in a sense, through the building data teams, let's say, watching progress and having students exit from the support services that they're receiving based on their improvement. But that's goal-based. Is this like sound like? I'm sure this all makes sense, but I'm asking you as the administrator closer to this, what your take is on this question.
So to answer the first part of your question, when the first COVID relief monies were coming through, they were very flexible on how they could be used because there wasn't much time to be able to define them. So literally one of the lines was at administrator discretion.
Okay.
Of course, we had more time to work on ARP-ESSER being the largest of that, which means that there are a lot more stipulations in terms of how that money can be used. And I've spent countless hours with Donna trying to make sure that all of the money is going into the correct pots and things like that. Just like with all federal programs, there is an accountability system, and that accountability system we just found out is the first round of that is going to be happening at the end of April, where we have a large report, well, every school district will have a large report of data that they'll need to send up that will specifically talk about the funding that has already been spent, what's budgeted, what's been encumbered versus the marginalized populations that are being affected. So we have a lot of work to do over the next couple of weeks to start putting all of that together. The one benefit, though, that I would have to say that we have found is having directors who are able to work closely with individual departments versus building principals who are covering everyone. Like, we have a pretty good sense of what the unique needs are across the district that way. So we've been sitting in on principal meetings and working with CJ and Danielle to kind of be talking specifically about what we feel would be super helpful to be within the ARP-ESSER grant, and not just that, but in federal programs in general in terms of the money. So all of these things do have to be measured out, and I'm working specifically with all of these different programs to make sure that we're collecting data on their effectiveness, because we will have to report on to that. And we're moving forward with cyclical monitoring for our federal programs next year anyway, so we know that we're going to be asked these types of questions, and we want to make sure that we're being thoughtful of them. But to your whole point of MTSS, I mean, that's really what we really are reflecting on right now, is making sure that everyone has a base understanding of what it is, because trying to build some of these programs without everyone understanding how MTSS can be effective puts us at a little bit of a loss. So that's kind of where we're starting at right now and building.
If I can compare it to another assessment system, I can compare it to thinking about the MAP assessment system, for example. And one through the MAP assessment system can determine to the individual level what their level of performance is, what rate of progress they're making, and we can be confident based on the MAP assessment, or attempt to be confident that that student is making a certain amount of progress, and or not. And it'll give us bad news as well as good news. So I'm wondering, I'm just throwing the idea out there. I mean, it's one thing to inform the feds and to give the feds or PDE what they want, or to fill out a form, essentially. I mean, I don't want to sound too cynical about this, but you can approach it from a pretty bureaucratic way of doing business. What's important in my mind is that how does it inform us? What does it tell the parents of these students how their kids are doing? How does it inform the principal and the teachers about how effective their everyday activities are? I think that's the question that comes to my mind, that's the front of my mind about, and all of these different again, moving parts. We have a lot of different programs that are in place. How can we make sure that they're organized and functioning as efficiently and effectively as possible? I'm just throwing that out there as a dream, in a sense, for the way in which it might look in a well-operating system, I would think.
I just want to say I want to thank Danielle and CJ for the conversations that they're already having and the leadership that they've been putting forward into implementing all of these things with some really good professional development and building on teams. And that's really what we're trying to do right now is to reflect where we are K-12 and then develop systems to make sure that there is fidelity and accountability when it comes to these things, because we realize that just like anything else, if there's not some checks and balances even on kids, that there could be some cracks.
Yeah, fundamentally it's about teaming. It really is.
But those things are happening, and I'm pretty impressed with how fast we've been able to build some of them up. And we're continuing to work with outside groups like the IU and Patton to be able to continue looking at our services and our procedures and reflect and improve.
That's great, John. Thank you very much. Very reassuring.
Thanks. Any other questions? Go.
Just a comment. I just, scrolling through this memo, I'm just shocked with the amount of things that we've done. And I just want to say thank you, from you guys to the teachers who are teaching 0 period. It's been a huge effort, and I just want to say thank you for that effort.
It really has.
Definitely.
I mean, there are a lot of moving parts to many of these things, and I think to Jonathan's point earlier, there's some pretty impressive supports being carried out that obviously will be challenged with what out of here is most impactful, and that we're going to want to figure out a way to keep moving forward. So.
Yes, John, thank you. Should have led with that.
Well,
Thanks so much.
Sorry, I tried to rush you out. I only had one bullet point, 2 titles, but 1 bullet point, so that's what threw me off. Okay, so we can, I believe, move on to board committee reports. So we are going to have, Dan, do you have anything to add that is necessary from Culture, Climate, and Learning, since those mostly came to the meeting?
Let's see, let me find out. There were 2 other items on the agenda that are worth mentioning. I don't want to take up everybody's time. One was an update, a curriculum development annual update, which really presented a matrix of that represented the areas that are under review and the pace at which they're being addressed. What's important, and that is available on board docs. If you go back to the agenda for that particular meeting, that matrix is there. But one of the takeaways from that discussion was that the pace at which we're working on the various areas of the curriculum and the engagement of the staff in staff development and curriculum enrichment activities has been impacted by the pandemic, so that we have to be careful that we're respectful of the work that we're asking teachers to do and others to do. So that's slowed the pace at which these things are taking place. It's still taking place, as, for example, the science curriculum is being field tested, but these things are occurring at a pace that is manageable within the system, which doesn't overwhelm the staff. The other topic had to do with a presentation on universal screening. Gene Canals offered a review of the Pennsylvania Youth Survey results, an initial review a listing of the initial results of that survey. The final completed report will be received in May. And this is for those of us who are new to the board. It is a survey through which we assess students in the 6th grade, 8th grade, 10th grade, and 12th grade years to assess for the risks for problems related to mental health needs and also drug abuse, school dropout, and violence. So we talked about the breakdown of the findings from that survey, and essentially what it says is that the patterns are similar as in earlier years, but the needs of the neediest are greater than they've ever been. So there might be a certain number of students who are within the survey, through the survey, there'll be a certain number that don't show much change in need from previous years, except for those who have the most acute are most acutely distressed or mostly acutely at risk. And this was a similar pattern that we saw with earlier screening regarding academics. So, it just means that we need to be alert and wary and attentive to the among others, to those who are the neediest. For example, among the things that are showing up through the survey is that the thoughts, suicidal ideation or thinking about suicide has increased significantly from previous years. So at least by the survey, these students become known to us. And we have right now 180 student referrals for mental health support in the district with an internal wait list of over 60 students. The district continues to otherwise provide support for these students, to conduct those who are on the wait list, conduct check-ins with those students on wait list, and finding creative ways to provide support for them until more explicit services become available. So those were and I discussed the curriculum development piece. So those were the elements that were not part of this evening's agenda.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Facilities and grounds, Gretchen, I think you chaired that.
Yeah, there's just three. The first, we already talked about, action item A, the traffic light study. The second is radio park traffic study. The safety of the intersection of Martin Street and Cherry Lane had been an issue. We've gotten emails about this. Ferguson Township conducted a traffic study and decided that the three-way stop sign was not warranted, that community members had wanted. And there's a whole list in the memo of what they are offering to do instead of that. And then the third is the attendance area process, and there was no attachment. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Bob. Randy just basically said it's coming along.
Yeah, the RFP is out.
The RFP is out.
And he had gotten a couple replies, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep. Thanks. Finance and audit, Debbie, anything to add?
Yeah, most of what we talked, it was a long agenda, most of what we talked about, we've already talked about here. The two things in addition were just briefly that the district was developing an RFP for bids on student portraits. And so that'll come back to the committee for a review in April. And then student clubs and activities, the administration is working on a summary of the student clubs and activities and how the funds are spent by building. And so that's just something that'll be ongoing.
Great, that's something we've talked about for a while, so that's helpful. And are there adjustments to the RFP for the student portraits that comparative to previous years?
We didn't actually.
Okay, that's fine.
Want to say, like, we didn't
Donna spoke about it last time about, so it wasn't just cost.
Right.
Okay.
We will be able
Yeah.
to make decisions not just based on cost. We do
So-
not have to go with just the low
Yeah.
cost. We can take into account also previous experience with student portraits. And we know very much who people don't want.
Okay, excellent. I just wanted to clarify on that issue that I figured that was being addressed, but it's helpful to be able to say that that's being addressed, so.
Don't worry, it'll be addressed.
We should not
Awesome.
turn our backs on all of those complaints.
You guys
for sure.
rock. Okay, so moving on to, hey, I gotta enjoy this position when I get it. Communications Committee, Laurel is no longer here. We both, I was there, although I'm not on the committee, but if people don't mind, I can go ahead and summarize that. We largely talked about the charge to the committee, some big scale ideas of how we'd like to communicate. I would imagine the minutes pretty well encompass it, so unless there's questions, I think we can move on from that one. In regards, unless there's something that someone wants to add okay.
The minutes reflect really well
Yeah,
the conversation that was had at the communications committee
Yeah,
meeting, and I am on the committee, so.
Awesome, we get great minutes. Upcoming meetings, the board's upcoming meeting schedule includes March 29th, 2022, Culture, Climate, and Learning Committee. That's a Tuesday at 10:30 at Memorial Field. Also that same day, Board Conversations with the Community is a public meeting, open at, so is Culture, Climate, and Learning, at 12 noon at Memorial Field. So we'll welcome members of the public to come and talk to board members about any topics that they have concerns about or questions or any of those things. We also have April 13th, 2022, board conversation with the community, which will be at 7 p.m. via Google Meet. So that's a virtual meeting for those who perhaps can't attend in person. Board reports, moving on. Dan, I would guess Is there anything from Central Intermediate Unit aside from the
Well, we
budget?
approved, the last IU board meeting, we approved the preliminary budget that we approved here this evening. And there were two other action items that mattered or were more substantial. One was empowering the administration, the IU's administration, to continue search for, as Dr. Angner refers to it, a permanent home for the IU. We've continued to have kind of this up and down experience in terms of working with different possible properties where they might build and move from the facilities they're renting now to something which is more permanent. So they empowered the administration to both identify potential properties and make initial offers following support and an executive session with the IU board we empowered the administration to make decisions like that to kind of help move the process along.
Great. SCASD Ed Foundation was Amber. I don't think she's on her way back, but I don't think she'll make it in time. CTC Local Advisory Committee, Carlene, anything to report?
We are going to meet on Wednesday, and I have a dinner afterwards. So we haven't had we haven't had a meeting since the last time that I reported.
Great. CAC Citizens Advisory Committee Liaison Reports, Athletics.
Yes, there's a few things that I wanted to talk about that. We did have a meeting on March 15th via Zoom, and we talked about the pep band that was created by one of the seniors. That was a success, and they hope that it continues because it builds school culture. And then we went on to the championships, but Bob already stole my thunder on all that.
You can repeat them. They're pretty cool.
So we did wonderful, and we're really happy about that. District, we had boys basketball, swimming team, individual wrestlers, and District 6 championship, and then we had a few in the state championship, indoor track and field, wrestling again, and the swimming, and we had some that broke records, and we had a few medalist winners, so we did really well. We're gonna have a spring parent meeting coming up, and I believe it's tomorrow, and they'll talk about some COVID protocols and also lesson learned from fall and winter. Then we went on to the proposal that I had mentioned last time about the fees that's going to be raised for this general admission. General admission will be the same, but the reverse seating prices will increase to $7 from $6, and the season tickets will be increased to $35 from $30, and the all sport passes will be increased to $20. The student and senior citizen will increase to $27 and from $22, and the adult increase to $50 from $42, and the family pack will increase to $90 from $72. And somebody mentioned about equity, about the people that can't afford it, and so we will look at ways to decrease give them a discount for people that get free reduced lunch families. And also maybe we thought about adding incentive programs for attendance or whatever and give these kids free tickets. Then we talked about sports camps and finding a way to increase middle school participation in sports and ways that we could do it. And so we thought about having youth camps or youth clinics model. Then we talked about the athletic facility rental fees and where the money is going, because although we're letting other people use our facilities, but there's been a lot of wear and tear on the nets and the goals as well as the fencing. And so they talked about how the board could increase the allocation of funds to the athletic department so that we could repair a lot of these things that are damaged. And then they also talked about charging for intramural, and everyone rejected that idea. We did not like that, especially we're trying to encourage kids to play sports, so charging intramural is kind of defeating that purpose. So some people thought about maybe we'll have t-shirts, if we did raise money to give kids t-shirts, like a participation. And also other people brought about the idea of not charging the students to participate, but maybe charging the parents to come and see the kids. Other people said maybe we should just ask for donations instead of charging a fee. And then I guess Amber spoke about maybe asking the foundation to look into that. Lastly, we talked about the student section, about how to recruit student leaders to be in the student section so that it could flow well. Also, we may recruit 2 or 3 faculty members to sit in the student section. And I said lastly, but I was mistaken. And they're going to have a coaches dinner June 1st. That's tentative. And so they were asking if anyone in the neighborhood know anyone that would want to sponsor this. Last time, they'll think the cost will be about $1,000. And then someone mentioned, why don't we ask the chef and also Megan so that we could decrease the cost. And then we talked about the traffic light issue, which is being brought up today at the borough.
Great, that was a busy meeting. I've been at those meetings. That's a lot for that meeting. Facilities, CAC, I'm not sure if we had a meeting, Peter. Does that ring a bell? Okay. Gretchen of Finance, CAC?
No.
No meeting, okay. School health and safety?
No.
Gretchen's, yeah,
There's
no?
one coming, but not-
Okay. And Jackie, technology, no?
Nothing.
Okay, great. So for future agenda planning, April 4th, 2022 is our next regular meeting, and action items will include potentially student portraits, and slated for information discussion is state high safety report. Okay, and with that, I'd like to call for a motion to adjourn the meeting to Quebec or no? Adjourn the meeting to an executive session.
So moved.
Seconded.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor of adjourning? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned. Have a good night.